Hello, 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 everyone. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, everyone. This is Fighter Shark 95, and welcome to London, everyone. Well, more specifically, London City Airport here today. Echo Golf Lima Charlie. We're back to where we left off on Saturday, on last Friday, of course, from the West Ham Leeds United game. But today we're here to cover this year's Champions League final between Arsenal and Paris Saint-Germain. So I hope you're all doing well here today. We're going to be heading to Budapest today, but we're going to be doing two different flights in two different planes, of course, for this one. Um, we're going to go from London City to Paris Le Bourget first. And finally, of course, then from Le Bourget, we'll take the BBJ2. We'll fly it over to Budapest at Fehérvári Airport. Fehérvári Airport. So we're going to be going over to there next. So before we get started, I do want to say hello to everyone else, the lurkers and the lurkers and mods. Hello, you guys as well. So if you guys don't know, of course, this Champions Final is a pretty big one, of course, between Arsenal and Paris Saint-Germain. These two clubs have been the two most successful teams in the tournament so far. Both have quite different roads to get there. In terms of Arsenal, the Gunners, of course, absolutely dominated the league phase. Arsenal were the only team to have never lost a single match in league phase. They were the predominant club in the league table. Paris Saint-Germain was in the knockout phase playoffs. Was in the knockout. They had to contend for the playoffs, of course. So, but Arsenal were completely dominant, and they were probably been the most dominant team in the entire tournament. For Arsenal, they took care of business. May not have been pretty, but Arsenal took care of business. They beat Bayer Leverkusen 3-1 in aggregate in their round 16. Then, of course, they beat Sporting Lisbon 1-0 in aggregate. Not pretty, but you know what? Arsenal does not care about pretty games. They just take care of business. They score the goals they need to and get there. And then they, of course, recently just beat Atletico Madrid in the semifinals 2-1 in aggregate. And the Gunners advanced to their first Champions League finals in decades, of course. They haven't been to the Champions League final in a very, very long time, of course. Their last Champions League final, of course, was their last time they went in this position was, of course, the 2005 and 6 Champions League final, where they lost to Barcelona. So, for the Gunners, they could finally win that long elusive Champions League trophy. In the course of Paris Saint-Germain, they had to contend with the knockout phase. They beat AS Monaco just by 1 goal in goal difference against AS Monaco, their fellow Ligue 1 side. Then they beat Chelsea in a dominant 8-2 aggregate, including a 5-2 win in the first leg. Then they beat the defending English champs, Liverpool, 4-0 on aggregate in the quarterfinals. And then PSG and Bayern Munich had a classic, but eventually PSG beat the German giants, Bayern. So pretty big stuff. Two very, very successful teams with a bit different journeys, but should be a good one here today. So for this first leg, we'll take the Palace PC-24 with us today. The reason I want to take a business jet out of here is, of course, A, the leg is kind of short, and 2, not very many aircraft can get in and out of London City due to its unique, elevation and things. So this would make things a lot easier. So we're going to take the PC-24 here today. Good old business jet. The PC-24, for guys who don't know, this is considered to be the most versatile business jet. It was built since 2015, 212 built. This plane is very unique due to the fact that, unlike many others, it could take off from very short distances. It could take off and land within about 3,000 feet, making this a very effective jet. So let me go ahead and let me go with 2,900 fuel pounds. You know what? This is actually just about right. So we're going to go ahead and turn on the checklist. And we're just going to get the checklist. Pre-flight inspection is complete. So with pre-flight all done, let's go ahead and it's already set. Battery on. Okay, thankfully this will be pretty simple. EGLC, Lima, Foxtrot, Papa, Bravo. Insert. Thankfully, flight plan of this, I had some bit of time doing this one, so I already have some familiarity with it. 50. Cargo. We're going to go ahead and get this thing computed. And our cruise altitude today is not going to be 20,000. It's just going to be flight level 1. Flight level 190. Insert. Activate. Amend the flight. Let's amend the route. So back to my thing. I'm going to do join. AIM 87. ECNIV insert. After this would be join AIM 91. LYD. Insert. Join AIM 191. WAFU. Join UM605. PTAX. Join UZ2 fill up. Perfect. And then of course we got this. We're gonna land at 2.5 with this. We're gonna do localizer A. We're gonna do the and activate. So let's look at our flight plan. Our flight plan looks good. It looks good. So with everything set, we just need to do send the pilot and send the computer data to our VNAV. So we got that final set up. So good. PFD, the barrel will be readjusted. Check. Fuel quantity good. And turn on the passenger signs on. So now let's go ahead and start our engines. So we're going to turn the engines on, of course. PC-24. Okay. We'll just start the right engine. There you go. I had to do that, so the reason I picked this one also is because I've been flying the business jet for the business jet achievement, so we're going to do that. So we're going to go ahead and get ready. We'll take off at runway. We're gonna take off from runway 27, of course. So we'll tax around the parking way. We'll get back on the runway and we'll go through to 27. Now the good thing about the PC-24 is it has short takeoff distance, so short takeoff rule is going to help with getting out of this airport, of course, of London City. So we'll be going along here today. So if you guys do know, the DC-6 spawn's out for MSF's 2024, which I'm very excited to do more flying. Though I have heard from people that there have been WASM crashes, so hopefully that gets fixed. I'll start flying the DC-6. I think I have some really exciting journeys with it, of course. But So we're going to go ahead and prepare to take off here from London City. Flight level 19,000 feet. This is going to be a 49-minute flight, so it won't take super long to get there. Let's go Toga, max power. Here we go. And here we go, guys. As we say goodbye to London. Here for our Gameday flight, we say goodbye to the English capital city of London here today. So, we're going to go ahead and climb it to 19,000 feet. Reduce the speed back to 210 knots. There. Now I'm back to the proper 210. So we've officially crossed into North London, of course. So as we say goodbye to the capital city of London, we should be making our way over down to Paris Le Bourget today. So we'll get started our notes in just a minute. We're just gonna wait and get up to the air for a bit when we start climbing. So a lot of crazy stuff's happened over the weekend, of course. In terms of international soccer and stuff, or international football, I mean, La Liga ended the season with the relegation of Girona, and Mallorca have been relegated. It's been a while since Mallorca has been into the second tier of Spain. Mallorca has not been in the second division in quite a bit of time. They haven't been down since 2020. In 2021, of course. And of course, Girona has also been relegated as well, and they joined the Segunda for the first time since 2022. They haven't been down there for quite a while, so... So in terms of Spain, at least, they now have several new promotions, of course, for next season. They now have clinched the second club being promoted from Spain. And speaking about La Liga, the other club that just got promoted from Segunda is a club that hasn't been in the top flight since 2018. Yes, in that club is Real Club Deportivo de La Coruña. Deportivo La Coruña. The blue and whites, of course, of Coruña. Now, if you guys don't know about them, they were once champions of Spain back in 2000, as well as winning won the Copa del Rey twice, and 3 Super Cups. They were extremely successful during the 90s and 2000s, were incredibly successful. They even played in the Champions League and even gone as far in Europe to advancing to the Champions League semifinals. Very historic club. They had bankruptcy, financial issues, and they played as far low as the 3rd tier of Spain, and now they're finally back up to La Liga. Big win for Spanish football. If Malaga joins, it would be one heck of a promotion. In terms of the German league, of course, for Germany, it's official. All 3 of the Bundesliga teams have just been relegated, including the playoff relegation-bound Wolfsburg. The first relegation in 29 years for VfL Wolfsburg. Their reign in the Bundesliga is over. Now, taking their place from the 2nd Bundesliga is going to be Schalke 04, another historic club in Schalke. Schalke 04. One of Germany's most historic and biggest clubs, Schalke. They're finally back. SV Elversberg has made it to the Bundesliga as well, and unbelievably, SC Paderborn has also made it too. So, yeah. Bundesliga is going to be interesting, especially with the return of the Riviera Derby back to Bundesliga. So should be a very interesting day there as well. The Premier League, of course, and it turns out that West Ham actually did get relegated on the 24th. Yes, West Ham United got relegated on the final day. Spurs somehow beat Everton. Yes, the Tommies are freaking useless when they matter the most. As an Evertonian, they still find many ways to disappoint me. We lost to Spurs, and West Ham got relegated. In spite of a 3-0 win, got relegated. Everton, you had one freaking job. So West Ham are headed down. At least as a consolation prize for West Ham supporters, you get to play Millwall now. We might cover that derby when we get down there. But coming in for the championship this year is we ended the playoffs, and the winner of this year's playoffs belonged to Hull City. Hull has made it back to the Premier League for the first time in several years. So should be an interesting Premier League next year with Hull City, Coventry, who haven't been there almost a half a century, and Ipswich, well, they got back last year. But should be interesting to see what happens. In terms of other leagues, of course, today is going to be the relegation playoffs for Ligue 1, for Nice and Saint Etienne, and the Serie B promotion playoffs in Italy for Serie A. So, pretty big deal, Phil, for more football, of course. At least that's for the big 5 leagues. Oh, and one more fun little thing. At the Taça de Portugal, the Portuguese Cup, guess what? Sporting Lisbon didn't even win that trophy. You know, Portugal's Big 3 has dominated Portugal for decades. Has dominated Portugal for decades. But here's the crazy thing. Sporting Lisbon didn't even win the cup, despite being one of the big 3. You know who won? How about the 2nd Division Torinese? From the 2nd Division of Portugal, won the Portuguese Cup. Which won it for the first time in history, and they now are qualified for the Europa League. a second division club. And they finished third in the second division of Portugal. They finished third. But they are going to be in the promotion playoff for the Premier Liga. So they still can make it to the first division, of course. But that's still pretty huge, though. And like I said, this should be very interesting for Torinese, of course. But they did lose in the promotion playoff to Casapia. But yeah, pretty embarrassing if you're a Sporting Lisbon supporter. So, big stuff. Hey, Quartz, good to see you. I hope you're doing well. We're going to go ahead and talk about the Champions League for a bit. So we're going to cover the Champions League, the UEFA Champions League, the main European competition for association football here in Europe. It's contested by the top division European clubs. The competition begins with round-robin league phase to qualify for the double-leg knockout rounds and a single-leg final. And it's the most watched club competition in the world, and the third most watched football competition overall behind the FIFA World Cup and the UEFA European Championship. And it's one of the most prestigious tournaments in the world, and the most prestigious club competition in European football. And this one's pretty recent. It introduced in 1955, of course, as the European Champions Club Cup, then the European Cup, and then the Champions League. In terms of the most successful clubs, it's Spanish clubs that have won the most. 20 in fact. And crazy enough, it's two clubs that got the 20 wins, with Real Madrid having 15 of the 20, being Real Madrid. And then, of course, you have English clubs winning 15, Italy with 12, Germany with 8, the Netherlands with 6, and Portugal with 4. However, English teams have had the most winning clubs with 6 of them. And the competition was won by 24 clubs, and 13 of them have won it more than once. And of course, the most successful club I mentioned is Real Madrid. So the history of the Champions League and what makes it prehistoric was the first time that two European leagues had met in what was named the World Championship was when the English champions Sunderland AFC beat the Scottish champions Heart of Midlothian, or Hearts, 5-3. The first pan-European one was established back in 1900 between clubs of the Austro-Hungarian Empire. 3 years later, the champions of Belgium, Netherlands, and Switzerland were the only existing leagues in Europe at the time, participated in its own club championship called the Coupe van de Straten Punthouse, which is the club champion of the continent. Of course, there have been minor competitions. However, what would ultimately change was starting the post-World War II era, and when they received reports from journalists on the successful South America Championship of Champions of 1948, Gabriel Hanot, the editor of L'Equipe at the time, became proposing of a continent-wide tournament. And the South America became the inspiration for the European Champions Cup. Of course, after Stan Colas declared Wolverhampton Wanderers the champions of the World Fall Successful Round friendlies in the 1950s, Hanot finally managed to convince UEFA to put into practice such a tournament, and it was conceived in Paris in 1955 as the European Champion Club Cup. And that is how the Champions League officially got started, of course. Now, the first European Champions League took place in the 1955-56 season. And 16 teams participated, some by invitation. And the clubs that went there for our very first Champions League or European Cup were the 16. The 16 include some many notable clubs that have had long European history. AC Milan, of course, the Rossoneri, AGF Aarhus from Denmark, the biggest club in Belgium, Anderlecht, one of the most historic clubs in Sweden, the Djurgården, Guardia Warsaw of Poland, Hibs, Hibernian from Scotland, aka Hibs, Partizan from Yugoslavia, from then Yugoslavia, PSV Eindhoven from the Netherlands, Rapid Vienna from Austria, of course, the one and only Real Madrid of Spain, Rot-Weiss Essen from West Germany, Saarbrücken from the Saar region, Servette of Switzerland, Sporting Club de Portugal from Portugal, or Sporting Lisbon, Stade de Reims from France, and Boros Lobogo of Hungary. And they played in their very first, and these were the 16 teams that played into the Champions League for the first time ever. The inaugural final took place at the Parc des Princes between Stade de Reims and, of course, Real Madrid. And ultimately, it was won by the Spaniards, led thanks to the goals from Alfredo Stefano and Marquitos, as well as 2 goals from Hector Real, put Real Madrid to win their very first of what would be 15 Champions Leagues. In fact, for the first early stages of the Champions League, Real Madrid were the dominant club. They won 5 in a row in the Champions League, including the legendary 1960 final, where there was a record for most Champions League goals in a final, as Real Madrid beat the German side Eintracht Frankfurt 7-3 at Glasgow's Hampden Park. Courtesy of 4 goals from Ferenc Puskas and a hat-trick by Alfredo Di Stefano to put the Mariniques to their 5th straight Champions League final. However, Real Madrid's dominance ended the next year, of course, at the hands of, well, their bitter rivals, Barcelona, FCB, in the first round. But then the Barcelona made it all the way to the final, and they were defeated by the Portuguese side, Benfica, at the Wankdorf Stadium in Bern, Switzerland. And then, of course, then the next year, they repeated by defeating Real Madrid in Amsterdam 5-3, led by the legendary Eusebio, the greatest player in Benfica's history, of course. However, unfortunately, Benfica did lose the final again to the first Italian winner of the Champions League, AC Milan, of course. And then for the next year, of course, is Inter Milan beat them the next year, beating Real Madrid to win the Champions League for their very first time. However, one of the most interesting Champions League stories, of course, was 1967, and one of the most iconic stories of European football was Celtic. Led under the incredible leadership of Jock Stein, the Scottish club Celtic beat Inter Milan 2-1 in 1967. The Lisbon Lions won the Champions League to become the first British team to win the Champions League. Yes, the first British team to do it. And all the players were born within 30 miles of Glasgow. They called them the Lisbon Lions, one of the most legendary teams in Scottish football history, of course. The next year was in 1968, and Manchester United became the first English team to win it, beating Benfica 4-1 in the final. The next year was the Dutch club of Ajax, becoming the first Dutch team to win one. The Ajax became the first team to reach the final of the European Cup and beat Milan. But the next year, of course, the first Dutch winner of the competition was Feyenoord, beating Celtic in the final. And of course, the next year was Ajax winning the title, beating the Greek side, Panathinaikos. Yeah, imagine that nowadays. Of course, this era was dominated by the Dutch and the Germans, of course. And finally, of course, Bayern Munich, becoming the first German club to win it from 1974 to 76. But yeah, it was dominated by the Dutch. That era was dominant. And then, of course, then the English clubs have dominated. Liverpool won their very first ever Champions League, won their first two titles in back-to-back years in 1977 and 78. Then, of course, in 1979, 1980, a club you wouldn't think nowadays would be Champions League winners, but Nottingham Forest won the Champions League. Yes, you've heard right. Nottingham Forest won it. Yeah, they are a big club. Don't forget Nottingham Forest. They are a very historic. A pretty big club, of course. And then, of course, Aston Villa won it in 1982. What was won by Aston Villa. But the team that broke the English dominance was Hamburg in 1983. Liverpool regained in 84. However, unfortunately for the English clubs, they were banned for 5 years due to the Heysel Stadium disaster that happened. As a result, following the 5-year ban of English teams, different clubs won it. Stadionway Bucharest won it in 85, Eindhoven in 19, Porto in 87, 88 was won by Eindhoven, AC Milan took care of business, won it twice, and of course Red Star Belgrade and Barcelona became the champions. And of course, Italian clubs dominated pretty much the 90s, was dominated by Italian clubs. Then of course the league then was expanded into the 2020s. And of course the era from dominance then became Spain, who won 3 of the last 5 finals and dominated the competition between 2014 and 2018. With Real Madrid winning 3 back-to-back titles in 2016, 17, 18, and Barcelona won it as well in 2005. So, of course, the COVID pandemic happened, and the tournament was suspended from March 2020 and resumed in August, and they were played in neutral venues, of course, without spectators. So that covers a bit about the history of the UEFA Champions League, and covering its history, of course. So that covers a bit about its history and stuff as well. So, here's our flight across the English Channel, of course. So here's the English Channel. We're just about 157 nautical miles from our destination here in Paris, so we should be getting here pretty soon. So, I hope you're doing well, guys. So this covers the history of the Champions League. So we'll talk about the rest of it as we head our way down to Paris, Le Bourget. So we'll cover the rest of it while we head down there. we'll get to that pretty soon. So we're going to go down. I'm going to go down. Just going to do this. Prepare for when top of the set's going to come. And speaking of top of the set, it's going to come pretty soon. Actually, here's top of the set. This is going to get interesting. So, let's talk about the format for a bit for our Champions League, and let's go ahead and talk as we just sit down to Paris-Le-Bourget. Now, in terms of the format, of course, the Champions League format, it used to begin with the double round robin group stage of 32 teams. Of course, it used to be that way, but now it's evolved into league phase. The number of teams that each association enters into the Champions League is based off UEFA coefficients for its member associations, and these coefficients are generated by the results of clubs from the previous 5 Champions League, Europa League, and Conference League seasons. The higher coefficient, the more teams represent the Champions League, and fewer rounds the associations team have to compete in. Of course, one interesting thing, of course, was in 2024, the UEFA changed the format of their 3 competitions, abandoning the group stage in favor of an expanded league phase. Teams are no longer divided into groups of 4 teams each, but are ranked within a single table, resembling the Swiss system tournament format. And that is pretty much what the league phase is nowadays. And of course, after the league phase, you have round 16. After the playoffs, the competition follows the traditional format with quarterfinals, semifinals, and then the final venue chosen prior to the season. And it's typically held here in late May or early June, which is what the case is here. So that covers pretty much how the format works. So finally, for our last Champions League slide is going to be the Champions League winners and runners-up. As you can tell, Real Madrid is number 1 with 15. AC Milan has 2nd with 7 Champions League triumphs. Bayern Munich is 3rd with 6, and it's tied with that along with Liverpool with 6. Then at 5th is Barcelona with 5. Ajax with 4. Inter Milan has 3, along with Manchester United have 3. Juventus and Benfica, Chelsea, Nottingham Forest, and FC Porto have 2 each. Then the rest are clubs that have won 1 championship. Borussia Dortmund, Celtic, Hamburg, Steaua Bucharest, Olympique Marseille, Manchester City, Paris Saint-Germain, Feyenoord, Aston Villa, PSV Eindhoven, and Red Star Belgrade. The club that's been the runners the most without winning the Champions League, by the way, is Atletico Madrid with 3. So, yeah, that's kind of been how our Champions League format's shaping up to be. So we're going to head down into Paris-Le-Bourget, of course. So that covers the first part of our slides. The rest of the legs and stuff is going to be covered when we get down from Paris-Le-Bourget into Budapest. And that's going to be the rest of the slides are going to be covered on the second leg. So we'll cover that there. So I hope you guys are enjoying the weekend. I hope you guys are playing some really nice stuff this weekend, of course. We're making our way down into Paris-Le-Bourget, of course. I hope you guys have some really cool plans this weekend. For me, I got my first soccer game this week. Louisville City and Tampa Bay Rowdies. I'm not looking forward to that one, of course, because Louisville City lost the last couple league games, and we're going against the best team in the USL this year with the Rowdies. That's not going to be very fun. But again, I'm going to be going to join my dad who celebrated his birthday that day. So I'll be going there tomorrow. So we're going to get ready to get going, of course. In terms of our instructions, the flight plan is going to say after PG 528, which is going to be this one, it's fly 106 degrees heading. So I'm going to adjust the heading to 106 degrees. Or I could do this. Activate. There. Okay, it went down to 9,000. It'll descend down to 7,000. So yeah, if you guys don't know about Paris, of course, besides just being the home of Paris Saint-Germain, but the city of Paris is actually a huge city. The largest city in France. 2 million people live in the city. Its metro area is at a whopping 13 million people, making it the largest metro area in the EU and Europe's fourth most populous city. It's known simply as the City of Light because of its role in the Age of Enlightenment. And Paris has been one of the world's major centers of finance, diplomacy, commerce, culture, fashion since the 17th century, of course. Paris is home to Paris is home to many of the beautiful museums. The Musée d'Orsay, the Musée Marmont Monet, the Musée de l'Orange are known for their collection of French Impressionist art, and of course the National Museum of Modern Art are known for modern art. The Paris parts of the city have been designated UNESCO World Heritage Sites since 1991. Of course, there are tons of landmarks here. And Paris has also hosted the Summer Olympics 3 times. Of course, there's a lot to think about Paris. Tourism is probably the most attractive city in the world. A lot of people visit so many of the tourist destinations. Where do I begin with how many people want to visit Paris? Crap ton of museums, including the Louvre, with 2.8 million visitors in 2021. Many people want to visit the Mona Lisa, the Venus de Milo statue, and the painting Liberty Leading the People. But you also have its military history with the Musée de l'Armée at Les Invalides. You also have many different palaces and arts. for years about history. It has a rich theater history with historic opera houses. And of course, who could forget about French cuisine? French restaurants and cuisines. Obviously, Paris is where a lot of the prestigious restaurants can be found here. And Paris has 10 of the 27 Michelin 3-star restaurants in France are located in Paris. All sorts of French cuisine, fashion. It's been an international fashion capital since the 19th century. And of course, who can forget, Paris also has a lot of sports. PSG for football, along with the rugby union clubs of Stade Francais and Racing 92. But lots of things in this city that are very well worth noting, of course. But yes, a lot of stuff in Paris. Where do I begin with it? Now, the airport we'll be visiting today, of course, is the historic Paris-Le Bourget Airport. Will be what we're covering today. This, of course, is one of the most famous historic airports in the world, Le Bourget. This airport dates all the way back in 1919. It was once the airport for Paris until the airport was constructed in 1932. It is famous for, of course, the land site of Charles Lindbergh's historic solo transatlantic crossing in the Spirit of St. Louis. It had been the departure point 2 weeks earlier for the French biplane Le Oise Blanc that took off for disappearance for a transatlantic flight of its own before disappearing, of course. In 1939, Howard Hughes flew the second non-stop flight from New York to Paris in 1939 before continuing to Moscow. Of course, Air France moved from Le Bourget to Orly in 1952, and the Paris Air Show was hosted in 1953. And it's been hosting it ever since. Of course, nowadays it's used for general aviation, as it was close to international airline traffic in 1977 and 1980 to regional traffic, but still continues to serve both domestic and international business aviation. And nowadays it's hosted the Muséum de l'Air et de l'Espace Museum, which is the state-owned aviation museum here in Le Bourget. So yeah, it used to be the airport here in Paris, but even nowadays it's still got a rich history. So, and that's why I picked this airport today, because it's a historic airport and it's made for business travel, which is honestly perfect for what we're taking here today. I'm sorry, I was looking at some picture. Someone from Earth Discord did it. So once we land here, we'll go ahead and switch out our plane for the for the BBJ-2. So we're gonna take the Boeing Business Jet 2 with us. Haven't took much BBJ action, so this would be honestly be perfect. Hey, Nightwolf, good to see you. It's going great, Nightwolf. We're doing two different aircraft, two different legs. We're doing the Champions League final today between Arsenal and Paris Saint-Germain. We just covered the Champions League and just the general format of it, of course. And we're going to arrive here on our first stop here at Paris Saint-Germain at Paris Le Bourget, and then we're going to take the longer leg into Budapest. And the reason we're doing this is because Arsenal hail from London, Paris Saint-Germain hails from Paris. So, doing London to Paris, and then from both of those, go into Budapest. So that's what we're doing here today, Nightwolf. I hope you're having a good day. Hey, Super Tom, good to see you. I hope you're doing well. I'm doing well myself, of course. Just doing some chilling and stuff, been doing some work. It's good to be back here doing the streams again. By the way, guys, for this week's streams, for this week's stream of content, tomorrow we'll be doing a 737-800 flight for Firefly Air. We're going to be doing Bristol to Innsbruck. Should be pretty nice. Haven't been out of Bristol in a while, and I thought, why not fly to Innsbruck? I mean, it's never boring. The Innsbruck approach will probably never get boring to do the Innsbruck approach. So we'll do that, of course. Flying to Innsbruck. Bit of a longer flight, but I think it would be pretty nice to do it with the 737-800. I think one of these days, I think the future is probably going to be Saturday speed with Firefly Air. Since we're doing two mainly general aviation stuff a week, I thought it would be better just to do the Firefly Air stuff in the week on Saturdays. Do some virtual airline stuff. I'll mix things up. Some of these I'll definitely run the business jets here as well. Integrate that into more of the schedule. Like, for example, some of the hubs may be better for biz jets. Like, Las Vegas would be a great biz jet hub. So we're going to sit down to 3,000. So that's what I'm going to be doing mainly on this Saturday. But oh, nice, you're getting some stuff done. Good for you, Nightwolf. It's always good to get some stuff done. For our next game day flight, I'm keeping track of the game day flights and stuff here for the text, so I need to update it, of course. Our next weekend, of course, is going to be either the NBA Final or the Stanley Cup. Or it could be both still, but looks like to be, of course, is going to be the NBA or Stanley Cup Final next week. So it kind of depends on which one. For the NBA Final, well, it's looking to be Game 7. The Spurs and Thunder are going ahead to Game 7, of course. The Thunder were absolutely dominated by Victor Wembanyama's Spurs, who have been absolutely dominant. Wemby truly is an alien. Like, how the heck are you going to cover a 7'4" guy who can shoot threes? How are you going to cover that? Oh wait, you can't. But yeah, it's going to be a Game 7, of course. I hope the Spurs win, because I think Spurs versus Knicks is going to be a really exciting final between the Spurs and Knicks. That's going to be a really exciting final, and I would be quite excited to see how well the Spurs will handle the Knicks, who have been unstoppable in the playoffs. Like, no, seriously, the Knicks are unstoppable this postseason. And I know people say, oh, the Knicks would be underdogs against the Spurs if that happened. But no, the Spurs have basically, the Knicks have been unbelievable. And what I mean is the Knicks only lost 2 games in the entire playoffs, and that was in the first round. The last 2, they've been completely dominant. So that would be really interesting. The other one would be the NHL Stanley Cup. And we already have the first team clinched in the finals, which is the Vegas Golden Knights have made it the finals. Yes, Vegas Golden Knights made it back to the finals for the third time in franchise history, and they swept the #1 seeded Avalanche. They actually swept the #1 seed Colorado. They had been fighting against the Mammoth and the Ducks, but to sweep the Avalanche, the President's Trophy winners, that's very impressive. It looks like to be Hurricanes and Canadiens. And if it ends today, we have Carolina versus Vegas. So I think they're both interesting options, and it's very likely they could continue into the next week if we choose to. But maybe for the NBA, I'm going to probably do the NBA Finals because I haven't covered the NBA much on the channel, so I want to do the NBA Finals. The reason I didn't do a lot of NBA stuff earlier in the year is because, of course, when we did this, the NBA season isn't usually the most exciting because unfortunately there's been a lot of tanking and stuff over the last couple of years, so. So that's kind of what I'm looking at for the final, of course. So I'll keep you posted for what's going on with the notes. Yep, we're going to go ahead and descend one last time into the localizer. Here we go again with descending. We're going to descend again. So, I hope, like I said, I hope you guys do well as usual, everyone. So we'll get ready for this trip. But yeah, this Champions League has been very exciting so far. I mean, there's been some very unexpected teams, of course. Bodo Glimt had an unbelievable Champions League run. They knocked out Inter Milan, who went to the finals last year in the knockout phase, which is among the farthest a Norwegian club has made it in recent memory. Of course, but yeah, the league phase, there was some pretty big surprises. Like, I didn't expect Frankfurt to do this badly, nor Villarreal, of course, who've been awful. But, like I said, the Champions League has been very exciting so far. Yeah. Should be interesting for next year's Champions League. Should be kind of exciting, though, because next year should be really interesting next season. Because there's going to be some very interesting clubs that are making it into the Champions League this next year. Because next year is going to be the debut of some of the teams in the Champions League. This is Como's first ever year in the Champions League. Italy's Como has made it to the Champions League for the very first time in its history, of course. There would be teams that would be competing for the first time ever. Como will make their appearance for the very first time ever, of course, is Como. And yeah, this year's going to be Como's first appearance into the Champions League, which is an unbelievable story if you think about it. So we're going to go ahead and adjust to my V speed. So here we go, guys. Paris Les Bourget. Now notice the land slope is actually curved like this. That's because, of course, if you look nearby to your right, you should be able to see Charles de Gaulle Airport. There's CDG, Charles de Gaulle Airport. If that wasn't there, it would have been pretty much a straight line to the airport. But because of the Charles de Gaulle airspace, Le Bourget has to have it like this. So should be an interesting approach. So 1,200 feet a minute. Should be an interesting landing here. Like I said, a lot of people are here from Charles de Gaulle, so. So we're going to go ahead and make the landing here pretty soon. Here we go into Paris-Le Bourget. So here's Paris. Down to below to our left. We'll go ahead and make the lane here. Yeah, this is going to be a bit longer than most of the other Gameday flight stuff because obviously the flight to there to here will be a bit longer. Off. And we'll get this off. So here's our airport. So here it is. Runway 25. Le Bourget. And we're down. Here she goes. Not bad. We landed at negative 188. Negative 188 feet per minute. So that's a good landing. So we'll turn here and we'll get back and park somewhere else, of course. So yeah, this is Le Bourget, very historic airport. If you're doing a lot of old vintage flying, this would be the airport to do some of your flying, of course. So we'll just go ahead and we'll find somewhere to park. Yeah, I do like Le Bourget. It's a really interesting airport. Rich history, of course. Not many GA airports have the rich history this one does. But of course, I'll be, once I find somewhere to park, I'll turn off the engine and we'll prepare for the next leg of the trip. We'll go from Bourget to Budapest. B. And we're going to go with the BBJ2. Let's park over here. So. So we'll just park over here to our left. And we'll wrap it up here. We'll park here, parking brake, and we'll turn everything off here. So welcome to Paris-Le Bourget Airport. Pretty nice, is it? Isn't it nice? So we'll do that. So we'll stay here for a bit. I'll get the. We're gonna go ahead and head back to the main menu. So we're gonna go ahead and prepare for our next leg. And for this one, of course, it'll be out of runway 21 this time around. So we're gonna go here. We're gonna go here. We're gonna go ahead and get the BBJ up and ready. So we're going to find the BBJ2 right here. Seven three 7-3-7-2. We'll do that. So let me go ahead and get back to Le Bourget. We'll put parking spot 8. We need something for large passenger space. We could do. We'll do it right here. So. So. So we're going to go ahead. I'm just going to leave it out right here for a bit. And I get the flight plan set up for my NAM app first. And then we'll do it. So we'll be doing here for just a second. So let's see. Let's go ahead. No ox tanks. So get everything set up for the flight plan. And then, of course, is going to be badge 2H. So that's going to be $31, right? There you go. Okay. Got the flight plan set up for my little NAM app. So we're going to go ahead and get ready. This is the BBJ2. We're ready with the BBJ here in Paris, of course. So we're going to go ahead and get her set up. Thankfully, I'm pretty well acknowledged in the 737 startup. Connecting the GPU card to this. You're here. So apparently for this one, it said 25,000 feet for this one. $25,000 for this one? That's a weird. Yeah, we'll go with the one that says 35,000 feet. So yeah, I adjusted it to be. It was 25,000 feet before. I felt like it's a little too low. Sometimes SimBrew gives you a really low altitude number. It just doesn't make sense sometimes. Two 640. So. So there we go. Let's go ahead and put the data. GPS left. We're going to go ahead and do LFPB. Late Bourget. We're going to do runway 21. Lima Hotel Bravo Papa. Let's go ahead and do that one. We're going to do land Q. Q. No pin. Bet 2. 342, 22, and we're going to do that. Laps 10. And we're going to do this. 109.50. Sorry if I'm not looking at the chat. I'm just trying to focus on this. Make sure I can think it right. For 35,000 feet. And our land elevation at Budapest is 481. So we're going to go set to 500. So we're going to do that. We're going to go ahead and turn off our flight directors. And we're going to set the speed at 8 to 55,000 feet. So we're going to do that, and we're going to set the barometric pressure. So we got that. We're going to remove the chocks. We're going to get the pressure. Put these, that. So, off to Budapest we go. We just need to get one last engine, and we get everything ready to get going. So we'll taxi it onto runway 21. We should get an approach through Bourget. We might be able to see the Stade de France. Here, of course. So here we go. We'll turn on the engine gens. Generators on. Here we go. This. Packs on. And APU off. And there we go. Yeah, the good old BBJ, the business jet version of the 737-800. Should be good enough to take off from pretty much all sorts of places. 1 hour, 50-minute flights. This should take a bit of a while, but I had to do the flight to both Paris and London and Paris, and then this. So we'll taxi all the way to there, of course. So yeah, some of the stuff is from the Paris Air Museum and stuff, and France Air Museum. Yes, BBJs have been shown taken in and off this airport, so. So 35,000 feet will be our max altitude. 1 hour, 50-minute flight. So we're going to turn here. We're going to turn actually a little slowly, and we're going to turn again to left. We're going to get to 2-1, obviously. I know those taxiways seem to be a little long, but it's just how it is in Le Bourget. Here we go. Toga. And we're off. We're going to go ahead and head off and make our way to Budapest. We're going to say goodbye to Paris. And we're going to say hello to Budapest in about 2 hours. And we say goodbye to Paris. So here it is, guys. A bit of Paris in the background. Including here the Parc de Stade de France, the French National Stadium in the distance. We might even be able to see a bit of the Eiffel Tower in the background. But of course, like I said, France, Paris is not easily seen from up here, of course. There we go. So now we're going to climb to 35,000 feet. And then, of course, on Sunday, of course, our National Park Series continues. We're going to be in Hawaii for the last time in the series. In Hawaii, we'll be checking out Maui's very own Haleakala National Park, featuring the dormant volcano Haleakala. So we'll check out the summit and coastal areas of the national park. Looking forward to showing you guys this too, and I hope you guys enjoyed learning more about this really interesting national park in Hawaii, of course. So now we went to 2 straight beautiful island national parks in this series. So looking forward to showing you guys all those. Yeah, this thing is climbing pretty quick. Yeah, the BBG's climbing real quick. Anyways, goodbye to the Paris Charles de Gaulle Airport. So we'll be mainly flying through through much of France. We'll go through here. We might be able to fly over some of the Alps, including Innsbruck. And we'll make our way down through Austria into Hungary. So we'll go through 1, 2, 3, 4 different countries before we get to Budapest. So we'll get ready to climb up to 18,000 feet. So there it goes. We're going to go ahead and get to 18,000 feet. Like I said, the one nice thing about the BBJ is definitely it's got better performance than the normal 737 because it is a bit lighter. It's not going to go nearly as it's more explosive when it climbs up to higher altitudes. So we're just going to go 35,000 feet for this one. So once we hit the 35,000 feet, we'll talk about Arsenal and PSG once we reach the 35,000 feet marker. So we'll be making our way through here. But yeah. This is going to be probably one of my longest game day flight streams. It's going to be over 3 hours. Don't normally do super long flights, but this is probably... But that's why it's streamed out earlier in the day. Don't worry about cutting close nearly as close on time, so... We'll get to 23,000 feet. We'll talk first about the Gunners and Arsenal. Arsenal football. Hey, Pappy Duck Finder, good to see you. We're in the BBJ2. We're flying from Paris-Les-Bourget into Budapest for the Champions League final this year. We actually started back in London City Airport in the Pilatus PC-24, and we flew all the way from there to Budapest. So into Paris-Les-Bourget. So it was pretty nice to see one of the business jets, of course. So I'm looking forward to that, of course. But we're going to talk about the Gunners first. Arsenal Football Club, aka the Gunners. They're the defending Premier League champions out of North London. The defending Premier League title holders this season. They play in Islington, North London, and they have won 14 league titles. Yes, not 13, 14, because, well, they just won this year's title, including one of those being the Invincibles campaign of 2003 and 4, one of the most legendary campaigns in English football. And, of course, they also won record 14 FA Cups, 2 League Cups, 17 Community Shields, and a Football League Centenary Trophy. European football, they did win a Winners' Cup in Interstates Fair Cup, and this year, they're looking to finally get the one European trophy that they have been missing from their trophy case, the Champions League. Of course, they're the first club from Southern England to join the Football League in 1893. They joined the First Division in 1904, and Arsenal carries the longest active streak in the top division, over 105 years. They have not been relegated. They've not been outside the First Division since 1919. And they completed the 20th century with the highest average league position of any club. And they also won the second most top-flight matches in English football history. Of course. And the name of Arsenal comes from the munition workers at the Royal Arsenal Woolwich. It was actually found in South London, then crossed the city to North London to Arsenal Stadium in Highbury, being close neighbors to Tottenham Hotspur to create the North London Derby. But of course, this club has a rich history that not many clubs have in English football. Of course, their iconic nickname is, well, it's simply, of course, the Gunners. It's their iconic nickname. And their supporters are called the Gooners. And no, it's not referring to anything not safe from work. It's derivative of the nickname of the team's nickname. So don't even think about having any crazy ideas. But yes, the Red and Whites, very historic club. One of England's most historic. Oh, nice! From New York JFK to Shreveport. Oh, that's a pretty nice regional flight. Pretty lengthy regional flight, but should be a nice trip though. For sure. Mm. Should be a very nice trip into Shreveport. Should be a good trip. Of course, Arsenal's unique historic crest was first unveiled in 1888, featuring the 3 cannons viewed from above, point northwards, which was similar to the coat of arms of Woolwich. And these can be mistaken for chimneys, but they're really cannons because of the presence of the carved lion's head in a castable, so they're clearly cannons. Of course, this was dropped when they moved out of Mountain to Highbury in 1913 and reinstated in 1922, adopting a crest featuring a single cannon point eastwards with the club's nickname the Gunners inscribed alongside it. Then it would last until 1925, when the cameras reversed to point westward. And this was pretty much the Gunners logo for pretty much the rest of the history until 2003. Of course, they changed their logo several times over the decades, including a modernized crest with the blacklight typography in the coat of arms of the Borough of Islington. And of course, they adopted their Latin motto, Victoria Concordia Crescit. Victory comes from harmony, and it was rendered in color. But of course, due to the numerous revisions of the crest, Arsenal were unable to copyright the crest, and as a result, and while they did manage to register as a trademark and had fought to win a legal battle, Arsenal sought a more comprehensive legal protection, and thus in 2002 they got the crest they now use. Nowadays is the crest they use ever since, featuring more modern curved lines in civilized style, which was copyrightable. And the can then faces east, with the club's name in sans serif typeface. And while the new crest was criticized by some supporters, as well. And that basically is the history of Arsenal's crest. And this one right here, particularly the one you see here in the picture, is the monogram badge that was used for the Gunners in the 1930 FA Cup final against Huddersfield Town. And this was the crest they used for that game, of that match. So, pretty important stuff here for Arsenal and their supporters. So we're going to take a quick break for just a bit. Let's take a look outside. Yeah, this BBJ is flying through. Yeah, looking forward to more of the series, of course. Next week, obviously for the next game day flight, it's going to be looking to be the NBA Finals. Hoping it's the Spurs and Knicks because I think it would be fun. And then for that one, we'll take a different plane. We'll take the 777 from San Antonio to New York. I don't think I can take it to LaGuardia. Technically, LaGuardia would be the closest to the Knicks' home ground of Madison Square Garden. But I don't know if it could fit a 777 freighter. But who knows? I could test it out. But if not, I could take the citation longitude for that one. That would also be a good one for the trip. So pretty cool stuff with all VR stuff here. So So we're going to continue on forward, of course. We're finally at cruise altitude here today. Where we're at right now, we are located. Um, we are located here in France, of course. We're just outside Parc des Forces. We're in eastern France, of course. Our flight plan is going to take us, of course, through all here. Strasbourg. We might be able to see the French city Strasbourg. Down to southern Germany. Into Austria. And of course, it takes us here too. So, kind of our flight plan today. Where we're going to be heading up, obviously. So, we're excited to get a lot of this sort of stuff going here with you guys, of course. But yeah, I may look to have one of the baseball stuff be more common as well. Mm-hmm. So, we're going to go ahead and cover some more about Arsenal for a bit. Don't want to cover all of it at once, but for much of their history, of course, Arsenal's home colors have been the classic red and whites. The red shirts with white sleeves and white shorts have always been pretty much Arsenal's traditional home colors. However, that was not always the case. The choice of red is a recognition from a charitable donation from Nottingham Forest. Soon after the foundation of Arsenal Football Club in 1886, two of Dosquar's founding members were former Forest players who moved to Woolwich for work. So, of course, due to all this, they got the red and all that. Of course, in 1933, after Herbert Chapman, who wanted his players to be wearing some dress, updated the kit to add white sleeves and changing the shade to a brighter pillar box red. And those shirts have come to what define Arsenal to the present day. And have worn it ever since, aside from 2 seasons in 1966-67 where they were all red, but it was proved unpopular. And the year was 2005-06, the last season Arsenal played in Highbury. And of course, their home colors inspired many other clubs, including Sparta Prague. Hibernian adopted their design for the Arsenal shirt in their own green and white design, and for Santa Fe FC in Colombia. And Sporting Club Braga also wear the Arsenal colors. For many years, the Arsenal away colors have been white or navy blue. However, when FA banned navy shirts because they looked similar to the refs, so they changed it to a kit of yellow shirt and blue shorts. And they proved to be quite nearly as famous as the red and white home kits. And of course, that remained the way until the 1980s for green and navy away kit. But it's mainly been either yellow or blue, has been mainly the main away colors for the Gunners. So pretty cool stuff. The Gunners very. Hey, Sky Command, good to see you, Sky. What you doing, my dude? I forgot to get Nightwolf and a couple other shoutouts. I forgot to give them that. Here's a shout for him, and here's a shout for Sky Command. Hope you're all doing well. Forgot to give you guys shoutouts. My apologies. Guess I was a bit slow this morning. Like I said, still getting used to streaming at 10 a.m. rather than 12 for the Friday streams. Kind of forget that sometimes. So, pretty neat stuff, of course. So we're cruising around 457 knots, of course. So coming up to our northwest should be the historic French city of Strasbourg. For guys who don't know about this city, Strasbourg is always straddled between the German. It's Alsace. It's Alsace. Alsace. But this historic city is world famous for its absolutely huge cathedral. The cathedral was once the world's tallest building for over 200 years. And it's a UNESCO World Heritage Site as well. It's an absolutely enormous cathedral, and it was built from 1015 to 1439. But yet, hard to believe that this was one point one of the world's tallest buildings. It is only surpassed by St. Nikolai's Church in Hamburg. So, so we're going to head our way to Budapest for the Champions League finals. So we're going to be here pretty soon. So we might be able to see the I know the cathedral is pretty much be tiny up 35,000 feet, but yeah, we're doing quite good here as well. So we're just about 540 nautical miles away from our final stop. So for the rest of our community, of course, Murphy will be back on, my good friend TTM, of course. He'll be back on Friday, he'll be doing a FS Expo fly-in from Cook County. He'll be doing some flying from Cook County to the Beach Bonanza to Superior, and then fly over to Minneapolis St. Paul, and then do a flyover at St. Paul before downtown airport. And then he'll be doing some Forza as well. Allie is going to be back on Saturday, of course. She'll be doing her historical flight tomorrow on her channel. Another leg of the LA Beinhorn Around the World trip. She'll cross over from the Iranian coastline. She then goes towards modern day Pakistan, and then enters into OKPC to Karachi. So it goes down the Iranian coast into Karachi. So we're going to go ahead and turn. We're going to turn right in this point. As we say goodbye to Strasbourg. There is Strasbourg down below. There she is. And now we're going to enter into Germany today. We're going to now enter into Germany. Hey, good to see you, Catherine Winterlick. Good to see you. Oh, nice. I hope you're doing all right. I'm mainly from So, mm, so yeah, Superior all the way up into Superior, Minnesota. Yeah, beautiful place though. Minnesota's a neat state. Very neat state, of course. I want to visit Minnesota at some point. Minnesota would be a really cool state. I know a few people from Minnesota. Really neat state, of course. Hmm. So, pretty area though. Absolutely gorgeous area though. Minnesota's really pretty. Got so many lakes. And I think it's not gonna be too much longer till we be visiting Voyagers National Park. I think that's going to be in a couple of streams. Yeah, it's within the next part. It'll be part 4. So we'll be getting here soon. We're just around 495 nautical miles away from our final stop. So we're gonna go ahead and cover Arsenal's home ground, the Emirates Stadium, or in the case for Champions League, it's simply known as Arsenal Stadium. But Emirates Stadium is been the home of the Gunners since 2006. Capacity 60,000 people. Um, of course, this replaced the old historic ground at Highbury. To finally get a new ground, of course. The pitch is always known as the carpet due to its incredible groundsmanship and pitch. And it's, of course, since 2009, it's undergone a process of arsenalization with the aim of restoring visible links to the club's history. And of course, the club hosts tons of international fixtures, including acting as a de facto ground for the Brazil national team in Europe, as well as hosting international music acts on the regular basis. But the Emirates definitely has had so many historic stadiums, of course, for the Gunners. Um, Honestly, the Gunners do have a rich history. It's definitely a pretty nice stadium, and of course, you all know about the club's rich history. Of course, they're now going renovations and and they're going to expand it all the way from 60,000 to 70,000 people, with changes to the seating gradient, which will expand it by another 10,000 people, which makes sense because tickets are often sold out at Arsenal games. And of course, it's hosted tons of music talents. Coldplay played multiple concerts, Green Day, and many more have have done tickets at Emirates Stadium. Of course, the ground they played, of course, they replaced Highbury, which was their old ground from 1913 to 2006 for almost a century. And Highbury hosted playing games and international matches. It even hosted some matches of the 1948 Summer Olympics, FA Cup semifinals, and its incredible pitch. So, neat area though. Emirates is a really cool stadium. In terms of their supporters and rivals, their supporters are simply known as the Gooners, because it's often a derivative of their club nickname, the Gunners. And virtually nearly every home match has been sold out. In fact, Arsenal has had the second highest league average attendance for an English club behind Manchester United. It has a 2015 the third highest all-time average attendance, and also have the seventh highest average attendance of any European club, only trailing behind the clubs of Borussia Dortmund, Barcelona, Manchester United, Real Madrid, Bayern Munich, and Schalke 04. The club's location, along with wealthy areas and mixed areas, create a very diverse supporters of different classes, include much of the Afro-Caribbean support as well, and South Asian make Arsenal a huge club, and they have massive amounts of supporter clubs, not just domestically, but all over the world. And Arsenal has absolutely massive amounts of supporters, especially in Africa. You won't believe this, but Arsenal and Chelsea are the two most supported football clubs in all of Africa, and a lot of it is due to the fact Arsenal, that's because Arsenal signed a lot of African players during the 90s and 2000s when people got access to the internet and TV and stuff. But they have all over the world. Arsenal have absolutely massive fan bases across the globe. In terms of their rivals, of course, the team's anthem is, of course, The Angel, North London Forever by Lewis Dunford. It is typically played at Arsenal games before the match. And their rivals, well, they have multiple of them. But the North London Derby is the big one, is the North London Derby with Tottenham Hotspur. And we covered that earlier in the series. The VOD for it is actually in my YouTube channel, !YT. And that is the North London video for that talks about it a bit more detail. But Tottenham Hotspur is a very bitter one for the Gunners. They also have one for Chelsea, the other huge London club of Chelsea. And during the 1990s and 2000s, they also had a very fierce rivalry with Manchester United. And there now in recent years has now been one with Manchester City too. But yeah, the big one is the North London Derby. So going through all of this was definitely a pretty interesting tale to learn. In terms of pop culture, Arsenal has been featured a lot in pop culture, which makes sense considering, because of their proximity to the Alexandria Palace transmitter, Arsenal have appeared in many media first. On January 22nd, 1927, their match at Highbury against Sheffield was the first English League match to be broadcast on radio. And a decade later, Arsenal became the first football match to be televised live or in the world to be televised live. They also featured the BBC's Match of the Day and Sky's coverage of Arsenal on 3D television. But Arsenal has made many, many firsts among media. And that's also no reason why they're also a pretty big club, because they appeared in media pretty much first. They've been featured a lot in arts in Britain due to their successful team and multiple mysteries. And of course, Arsenal have always been stereotyped as a defensive and born side, especially during the 1970s and 80s. And it was even featured quite a bit in the 1997 film The Full Monty, which the principal characters would form a line and raise their hands, mimicking the Arsenal defensive offside trap. As well. So yes, the Gunners have been featured a lot in pop culture. And I'm not kidding. They've been all over the place. And then finally we have their club honors. And yes, this includes their Premier League title this season. They finally won it for the first time since 2003 and 4. Their Invincibles campaign was the last time they won it, and they now won for the first time in a generation. Their record 14 FA Cups. There are 2 EFL Cups, 17 Community Shields, a Centenary Trophy, in the 2 European trophies they have, the Cup Winners' Cup and Interstates Fair Cup. That being said, tomorrow is the Champions League final. They get a big win. They get to finally add the Champions League trophy into the trophy case. Of course, the losers will have to be all the opposing fans, rival fans having to deal with the Arsenal supporters. But you know what? Let the Gunners celebrate. And finally, let's look at some of their legends, of course. Arsenal are one of England's most decorated clubs, and they have some rich amount of legends. And there is a ton of legends that I can even think about. Of course, when I put top of the list for legends and icons of Arsenal legends, the guy I think top of the list is Thierry Henry, their all-time leading goal scorer, and possibly the greatest player in Premier League history, Thierry Henry. Um, the dude is an absolute icon from France. Played for the Gunners between 1999 and 2007 and rejoined in 2012. He originally came from Monaco. He originally played quite a bit of time in Monaco and Juventus, but when he joined the Gunners in 1999, he transformed into an absolute legend of the game. He won the FIFA World Player of the Year in 2003-4, and even was a runner-up for the Ballon d'Or in 2003. And he was named by Pele to be one of the world's greatest living players. And he's legendary for his composure, elegance, dribbling, close control, finishing, and chance creating as well. And of course, his style of play made him an absolute legend at Arsenal. And he is still a very popular and very beloved player for football fans. Of course, there's a couple other ones. We have the historic David O'Leary, who's played more games than anyone else at Arsenal, over 700 games at the club. And he's played for the Gunners between 1975 and 1993. And of course, definitely an icon for the Gunners, of course. And he was definitely a very good defender and stuff, and he had years and years of experience, of course, for appearances. Then, of course, you have Tony Adams as well. Of course, another iconic player is Ian Wright. Their second leading all-time goal scorer is Ian Wright, who also played for Crystal Palace as well. He also had a long career at Crystal Palace, but he especially became a star for the Gunners, based on his speed, agility, finishing, and aggression. And of course, like Thierry Henry, he's now been very active in football-related TV and radio shows. And he's also a huge advocate for women's football, which he did a lot of support for women's football nowadays, which is definitely very nice to see too. After Ian Wright, we have Tony Adams, aka Mr. Arsenal himself. Tony Adams, Mr. Arsenal. One of the greatest ever players to play for the club, played all 19 seasons with the Gunners. A one-man player, one club player, winning 4 English titles, as well as 3 FA Cups, a Cup Winners' Cup, and 2 Community Shields as well. And of course, he's one of 6 people to have his own statue at the Emirates Stadium. Definitely been a major player. Very well known for his stopper and his defense, for his physicality. But definitely an iconic star for the Gunners, especially for the 80s and 90s. In terms of other stars, you have Robert Van Persie, one of the greatest strikers of his generation, and became a major goal scorer during his tenure at Arsenal from 2004 to 2012. Of course, another one is one of the greatest Dutch players of all time, Dennis Bergkamp. Him and Thierry Henry formed quite a duo during their time at Arsenal. And one of the greatest players of his generation, as well one of the greatest players in the Premier League's rich history. And of course, he also is the only Dutch player to ever be in the English Football Hall of Fame, which is a pretty massive accomplishment if you ask me. Of course, you have Dennis Seaman. David Seaman is their historic goalkeeper. Dennis Seaman has been their longtime goalkeeper, and definitely one of the most successful goalkeepers in English football. And he was even once nominated for a Ballon d'Or in 1998, one of the greatest goalkeepers of all time by his compatriots. And one of the greatest ones in English football history, thanks to his iconic goalkeeping abilities, of course. And there are many more legendary players that played for Arsenal. George Armstrong was another one that played in the 1960s and 70s. In more recent times, one player that's been on the rise for the Gunners, Bukayo Saka, has been on the rise over the last few years, and he could definitely become an Arsenal legend in the future. And I think Saka could definitely become one of those icons. So yeah, that covers all about Arsenal today, all about the Gunners. This Champions League final is going to be a very big deal for Arsenal and its supporters. So that covers about Arsenal Football Club, the Gunners. So we're now entering into Austria. So here is the city of Innsbruck down to our right. Should be the Austrian Alpine city of Innsbruck. This is where we're going to be landing at on Saturday. Beautiful Innsbruck. But absolutely gorgeous city, of course. Innsbruck's always been a pretty approach. Looking forward to that with you guys. So that covers a bit about Arsenal. So in about a few minutes, we'll cover about the other club, the biggest club in France, Paris Saint-Germain. We'll cover in just a little bit. But yeah, we can still see much of the Alps from here too. Absolutely gorgeous Alps. Stunning area to fly for GA, especially for GA. You can't go wrong with flying general aviation here in the Alps. Absolutely breathtaking scenery here this afternoon, of course. So I appreciate all you guys sticking around for this flight. We're going to be going ahead for the next leg of the trip. So let's go ahead and cover the Parisian football giant Paris Saint-Germain. PSG, Paris Saint-Germain, was founded back in 1970. Yes, it's actually relatively a newer club compared to Arsenal, a much newer club. It was following the merger of two different clubs, Paris FC and Stade Saint-Germain. It competes in Ligue 1, the top tier of French football, and they play their matches at the Parc des Princes. With 59 total trophies, including 58 major titles, they are the most successful club in France, and is the most popular football club in the country, and one of the most popular in the world. And of course, they have major rivals, Olympique Marseille and Paris FC as well. Of course, a lot of that success, of course, they won titles in the 1980s with their Coupe de France and their first title in the 80s. And they also continue to rise in the 90s with 9 more trophies. However, what ultimately changed was when they were acquired back in 2011 by the by QSI, Qatar Sports Investment. They became absolutely huge, and they now become the regularly dominate domestic competitions and a regular contender in the Champions League. In the last season, they won their very first ever Champions League title, and then adding the Super Cup and FIFA Intercontinental Cup to compete the most successful year in club history. This year, of course, they once again won the Ligue 1 title. Other trophies, of course, they won 54 domestic trophies, a record 14 Ligue 1 titles, 1 Ligue 2 title, 16 Coupe de France, a record 9 Coupe de la Ligue, and 14 Trophy des Champions, which is the French Super Cup. And of course, internationally, they're also the most decorated French club. 5 major trophies, the Cup Winners' Cup, the Interlocal Cup in 2001, but of course, their big one, the Champions League in 2025, when they crushed Inter Milan 5-1. Absolute decimation and stuff, and a continental treble. And the first French club, second French club, the first French club to commit a continental treble. And of course, they even won a sextuple, winning 6 in one season, making it only one of 3 clubs to do it in Europe, being Barcelona and Bayern Munich. Absolutely insane to win all those trophies, of course. And they're now one of the most wealthy football clubs in the world. They're the richest club in France by a mile, and among the wealthiest in the world. So yeah, PSG, absolutely massive club, especially nowadays. But of course, the major downside to have the investment from Qatar is that it's made every other French club nowhere near as successful. Like Olympique Marseille has been overshadowed. Marseille has been sadly been overshadowed. You also have clubs like AS Monaco, Bordeaux, which is now in the lower leagues, Lille, Lens, Nantes. All these aren't really cool French clubs. They just get overshadowed by PSG's complete dominance. In terms of the club's team colors and mascot, ever since their foundation, they've been both represented by the city of Paris and the royal town of Saint-Germain-en-Laye. So the traditional colors are red, blue, and white. And the red and blue are the classic Parisian colors of the revolutionary figures, and the white is a symbol of French royalty and Saint-Germain. Of course, the crest has, of course, the Eiffel Tower, and the fleur-de-lis in white is a hint to the coat of arms of Saint-Germain. The club mascot, of course, is Dramon the Lynx, who also sports the colors, and he was unveiled in 2010, mainly entertaining a lot of kids. Yes, it's a lynx. Actually, it's a mascot. Pretty interesting little animal here. The lynx. Pretty neat animals. In real life, they're part of the cat family. And they got cats living all over. And with ibex species living in North America, Europe, and Asia. So pretty huge stuff here for PSG, the mascot. The crest evolution of PSG's crest um, followed the merger of Paris FC's Paris Saint-Germain to create PSG. The club's first crest was the same as the original Paris FC logo. A blue football with a red sailing ship sailing through the winds, as the ship is a historical symbol of Paris and represents the club's coat of arms as Plus Fluctuat Nec Mergitur. Though after Paris FC was separated in 1972, PSG got a new crest representing both Paris and Saint-Germain. The second crest became the basis of the one we all know today, representing the Eiffel Tower in red across a blue background and two symbols of Saint-Germain in white, the fleur-de-lis and the cradle of Louis XIV. This crest was first used back in 1972 and it was created by Christian L'Entretien, a former PSG director. Of course, in 1982, then the image of the club's stadium was added to the bottom of the crest and remained there until 1990. Then, in 2 years later, the crest was changed radically by its new owners at the time, Canal Plus. But it was not very popular with the fans. So in 1996, they changed it back to the traditional crest as well. Of course, it was then redesigned by its new owners in 2013. The word Paris is mainly written in large bold letters above the Eiffel Tower, and clearly emphasized Paris. The cradle of Louis XIV and the club's founding year have been omitted. And the reason they call it Paris is because it's mainly, we are called Paris Saint-Germain, but we are above all, we are called Paris. So the one crest we see here is mainly the original crest that was served between 1972 to 1982 and then later 1990 to 1992. So it's actually the major crest that was the long time one they used. Pretty neat stuff. We'll go through. Their home ground is the Parc des Princes. That is their home ground that was built all the way back, opened back in 1987. And it was rebuilt in 1972. It's been the home of PSG since 1974. Its seating capacity is 47,000 people, which is pretty large. But the thing is, though, it's not even the largest Ligue 1 venue. That's because, of course, there is a much bigger that's because for Ligue 1, it's not even the biggest stadium in the league. The biggest stadium in the entire league. In fact, there are 3 other stadiums in France bigger than it. The biggest one is all the way in Marseille, the Stade Velodrome. Lyon has a stadium that's 59,000, the Parc Olympique Lyonnais, and even Lille is bigger at the Pierre Mauroy. So interestingly about this stadium, of course, before its opening in Stade de France 1998, the park was also the home of the French national football team and the national rugby union team. And of course, the record attendance for the French football team was around 48,000 people. But it's a pretty neat stadium, rich history. It's hosted the 1938 FIFA World Cup. It hosted its first European final, all the way back, of course, with Barcelona Real Madrid. In fact, the original Cup final stadium between Real Madrid and Reims was held right here in the stadium. Too. Of course, PSG has actually been thinking about moving out here over the last couple of years due to the fact with PSG being so much bigger than people even imagine nowadays. To increase it to 60,000, they're trying to look for potentially a new stadium, and the club is actually now planning on leaving the stadium in the future for a new ground because of course PSG has gone so much bigger nowadays as a club. So they're actually thinking about moving, of course. But pretty big deal for the Parisian Giants. In international football, they are the most successful French club in international competitions. After all, they won 4 titles, of course, and they've now won 5th. The UEFA Winners' Cup in '96, the Interlocal Cup 2001, the Champions League, and Super Cup in 2025. And they've also won the FIFA Intercontinental Cup in 2025 as well. They're the only French side to ever win the UEFA Cup Winners' Cup and the first to win the Continental treble and the Super Cup, making them very historic. Now, their first ever European debut went back in 1982-83 season, qualifying for the Cup Winners' Cup as they were the winners of the Cup de France winners. And they played their first match was against Lokomotiv Sofia and reached the quarterfinals where they were being eliminated by Warshay Thor, which, believe it or not, does not even play anymore in Belgium. They were actually dissolved back in the 80s. But then they competed the Champions League in 1985, and before they're taking their steps, the Champions League the very next year in '87. But yeah, they've had a rich history of making European competitions. They reached their first Champions League final in 2020, but unfortunately Bayern Munich got in the way of that. And of course, 5 years later, well, they won their very first Champions League, defeating Inter Milan in the finals. And they competed all over the place. They almost won the Club World Cup final, but they lost to Chelsea in that game. But they did win the Super Cup and Intercontinental Cup as well. Can you imagine if they won 7 trophies in one season? It would be absolutely insane. But pretty incredible club. PSG have absolutely been a juggernaut in France. No question about it. In terms of their supporters, PSG are the most popular club in France and among the world's most followed teams. And of course, they've been mainly traditionally divided into 4 stands: the Tribune Italie, Tribune Paris, Tribune Borelli, and Tribune Boulogne. Historically, the Italie and Boulogne stands have been the stronghold of PSG's ultras, making it one of the most intimidating venues in all of Europe, while the more family-friendly and welcoming group stands typically gather in the Paris and Borelli stands. Of course, the history of ultras and the ownership group have quickly escalated with violence, and they've had been up and down with ultra history. But based on incidentally, the CPUP are the only ultra group recognized by the club and allowed them to take over the balloon stand during the 25-26 season. But they try to keep all the ultras under control. In terms of rivalries, of course, Paris Saint-Germain has 2 pretty important ones, but the 2 big ones is the biggest derby in France, Le Classique. We'll cover that in the future. And that's the rivalry between Paris and Olympique Marseille, the biggest rivalry in French football and one of the most notable fixtures in world football. And these 2 absolutely hate each other. And these 2 were historically been the 2 most dominant clubs in French football, and the 2 most followed French clubs in general. And it grew ever since the 1980s, and even more so in the 90s as well. And then the other one is Paris Derby between PSG and Paris FC, the 2 largest clubs in Paris. Though they haven't faced each other too much nowadays, with Paris FC's promotion to Ligue 1 this past year, Um, they faced off in 2025, and it became a pretty significant fixture in France. Paris FC even in fact, this past year, Paris FC even defeated PSG twice. They knocked out Paris FC knocked out PSG in the Coupe de France, and of course they even lost a league match as well. But but definitely some pretty interesting rivals, of course. And finally, we'll talk about their club honors. I mean, there's their record 14 League One titles, and yeah, you can see ever since Qatar Sports Investments came, 12 of the 14 came from Qatar Sports Investments, as you can tell. Then there's their 16 Coupe de France's, they've been completely dominant in the competitions. The 9 Coupe de la Ligues, the 14 Super Cup trophies. Of course, there's their Champions League, Cup Winners' Cup, Interlotto Cup, UEFA Super Cup, and the FIFA Intercontinental Cup for Paris Saint-Germain. Very rich histories and very interesting passions, of course. Finally, of course, is the notable players. And the player I put here on top of the picture, Ousmane Dembele. Yes, the reason I put him top of the list is because, of course, this was the guy who won not only their Champions League trophy, he is actually one of only 2 players to have won the Ballon d'Or with PSG. The other one being, of course, Lionel Messi. But from what I know about Dembele, of course, he had a very interesting career. Born in Verdun, France, he played for much of his early senior career here at Stade Rennais. Then played at Dortmund. Then he became a player at Barcelona. He was a massively expensive transfer to Barcelona. However, he never met expectations of Barca. However, he did win domestic honors, though. But he ended up returning back to France, and he became truly a dominant player for PSG. He 2-time League One Player of the Year. He was the Champions League Player of the Year last year, and of course, he helped them win their very first ever Champions League trophy, and that's how he got to be a Ballon d'Or in 2025. Absolutely incredible player, unbelievable talent, one of the best in the entire world. Then, of course, is PSG's all-time leading appearances leader, Marquinhos, one of the best center backs in the world and one of the world's most decorated players. He's been part of PSG since 2013 and is still here to this day. He's won tons of trophies for the club. And he's been their team captain since 2020. And he won 11 League One titles as a player, 14 domestic cups, and a Champions League title. And he's also their all-time appearances with over 500 of them, which is insanely impressive. And definitely an incredible club legend. Now, of course, I know a lot of people are going to be kind of controversial at first, but come on. You guys wouldn't think I wouldn't put Kylian Mbappe on this list. I know you guys are going to be crazy to not put Kylian Mbappe on this list, but I'm going to put Kylian Mbappe. Because I know a lot of you guys know he's Real Madrid now, but let's not forget he is PSG's all-time goal leading scorer. In the 7th highest in Ligue 1 history. He was actually born and raised in Paris. He began his career in Monaco, but then at 18 he signed a massive $180 million transfer to PSG, and let's just say he was statistically one of the most dominant goal scorers in PSG's rich history. Of course, he never won the Ballon d'Or during his time, but he was an absolutely dominant goal scorer for the club. And during his time at PSG, he scored 256 goals in 308 total appearances at Paris Saint-Germain, of course. Though, of course, he did eventually lead PSG to join Real Madrid. As well. Then after him, of course, we have to talk about Lionel Messi. Yes, Messi came to play for PSG. I know it's weird to say Messi played for PSG, but no, I'm serious. Messi did play for Paris Saint-Germain for a couple of years. He actually, Messi was, I definitely put Messi as a club icon. After all, of course, he's one of the greatest footballers of all time. And of course, PSG was where he went when he left Barcelona, which was absolutely shocking for a lot of people in La Liga. And he joined the Ligue 1 club Paris Saint-Germain on a 2-year contract. And he even won a Ballon d'Or, the first one from a PSG player. And he definitely was pretty important for PSG's uh, title hunt, but he did have some disappointing stuff. But like I said, he still is a pretty important player for PSG, just not as much as some of the others. Now, here's a funny one, too. That being said, if you want to talk about famous players, how about Zlatan Ibrahimovic? This was, I think, peak Zlatan is in Paris Saint-Germain. Now, of course, he played for all three of the Northern Italian clubs of Juventus, Inter, and AC Milan. But I think peak Zlatan was Paris Saint-Germain because he, in fact, he was one of their first major stars to join the club during by the Qatari sports investment. He was one of their very first stars to join the club. And he truly had built the basis of what modern PSG is all about. Incredible goal scoring talent, and he helped PSG win several league titles, trophies, and all that. And at one point, he was even once one of the top goal scorers in the club's history. But definitely a massive club icon for Paris. Then some of the other notable club legends, we have Jean-Marie, is of course Jean-Marc Pilegret. He's their previous appearance leader for PSG until Marquinhos surpassed him, but he was a pretty big club icon for the pre-Qatar days, from 1975 to 1989. As a major defensive player and mainly associated with the club for a long time. Then, of course, you also have Thiago Silva, also another major defender and major partner of Marquinhos. Thiago Silva became one of the best defenders of his generation and major part for PSG success during the 2010s. And of course, you also have the Argentinian star Angel Di Maria, and there's plenty more other icons of Paris Saint-Germain. And that covers our last slides on PSG. So that's it, everyone. That's our slides for today. I hope you guys enjoy some of this stuff. So we're now going ahead and prepare to arrive here in Budapest. So we'll be coming up to the historic city of Budapest pretty soon. So we still have 152 nautical miles left towards it, and we finally arrived in Hungary. Pretty flat, though there are some hillier sections around Budapest, of course, but it is pretty flat. So here we go. 100, 109.50, it's already been set, so we're going to go ahead and descend down to Budapest. Here we go. We're going to drop. So, yeah, we're doing pretty good here today for the virtual airline. But yeah, there's a couple other people flying into other places too. So, pretty close to doing here. This should be a pretty quick descent. So yeah, we're gonna arrive into Budapest now. Budapest, for those who probably don't know, of course, it's the site of this year's Champions League final here at Budapest. But the historic city of Budapest is the capital most populous city in Hungary. 1.7 million live in Budapest. Its metro is around 3 million people, which is a one-third of the entire population of Hungary lives in the Budapest metro. And it's also around the 40% of its economic outputs from here too. This city is a global city and one of the 50 most important cities in the globe. The city is rich with tourism, and its center is a World Heritage Site, featuring from the 13th century Matthias Church to the in Buda Castle to the 19th century landmarks, including the very striking Hungarian Parliament, State Opera House, and St. Stephen's Basilica. It is also the spa capital of Europe due to its geothermal springs and thermal water cave system. It is also home to the second largest synagogue in the world, the Doheny Street Synagogue, and the third largest parliament building in the world, over 40 museums gallery, nearly 10 Michelin-starred restaurants, and it's one of the world's best food cities, thanks to its distinctive Hungarian cuisine. It's been a center for Hollywood film production and major sporting events. Lots of really cool stuff in Budapest. Really cool city, and like I said, it's a very neat area to visit. Budapest is really cool. There's all sorts of incredible sights in the city, of course. Huge stuff here. Of course, Budapest has got the Puskás Arena, which is the home of the national team that has 67,000 people, and it's named after, of course, the Hungarian legend Ferenc Puskás, one of the greatest players of all time. But really cool stuff. It's now hosted tons of UEFA club matches um, as well. It's hosted a ton of Hungarian club matches as well. In terms of football and sports, obviously, Hungary does have its own league, the Nemzeti Bajnokság, which is the Hungarian top level league, and they have several famous clubs, but the most historically successful club in all of and it's the highest level of clubs. But the most successful Hungarian champion and the most successful Hungarian club is the club of Ferencvárosi TC, and they play in Budapest, and they've won a record 36 domestic titles, 24 Hungarian Cups, and 6 Super Cups. They even won an Interstate Fair Cup internationally, defeating Juventus. Um, and they even made it to the Cup Winners' Cup final in 1975, losing to Dynamo Kiev, which is the most successful Ukrainian club. But very interesting stuff about Hungarian culture and stuff too. Hungary is definitely a very interesting country, and it's not just because of culture, but its language is very unique. Hungarian is a very, very unique language too, because it's not like many of the other languages. Unlike many other languages in this region, it's not Slavic or Latin. It's Ugric language. It's actually more related to Finnish and Estonian than it is related to than to any of the other two. So it's more closer to many of those than that. Which is pretty crazy to think about Hungarian. It's more closely related to Finnish and Estonian than it is to Slavic or Latin or Germanic. Um, and a lot of it has to do with the fact that a lot of the people in the steppe tribes have moved in this area, and amazingly, they still kept much of the old language stuff for all these years. But like I said, it's a very tough language to learn. Hungarian is a very tough language. And it's actually one of the toughest European languages to learn for English speakers is Hungarian. It's a super tough language. It's even tougher than that of Basque or maybe the Slavic languages. It's tough to learn. So pretty cool stuff. Like I said, very neat language, of course. In terms of food as well, Hungary's cuisine is also pretty special too. And of course, it's considered to be the spiciest in all of Europe due to the fact that they use a lot in many of their dishes, a lot of Hungarian paprika. That's their main thing they use on all of their spices. Here we go. We're about to make our landing. Here in our airport for our final stop, of course, is Budapest Ferenc Liszt International Airport, named after the Hungarian composer Franz Liszt. Um, this airport is the main airport of Hungary. Over 17 million passengers flew out of this airport in 2024. But this is the largest of all its airports. 2 runways, and it covers 1,500 acres, and it flies to destinations all across Europe, Africa, and the Middle East, and Asia too. It flies to everywhere in Asia, Europe, and Africa as its main destinations. And even North America with seasonal flights into North America via American Airlines. But yeah, it's a pretty important airport. And last year was a record 19 million flew out of this airport. Very important little airport, and it dates back to the 1930s, 40s. So here we go, guys. We're going to enter into Budapest. So if you look to our left, you can see the historic city down to our left. Historic Budapest. So, so So once we go to Attica, we'll turn on our thing, and we're going to go ahead and prepare for the landing for the BBJ. Then we'll find somewhere to park. And we'll conclude the flight here as well. So, really important stuff, guys. Really enjoyed this trip here down in Hungary. So, here we go. Getting into Budapest. So, we'll turn left. And once we go to Attica, I'll prepare the glide slope and all that. So, really cool stuff though in Hungary. Very neat, very underrated country to learn. So here we go. We're about to arrive into the beautiful city of Budapest. So here we go. Yep, and here we go. The landing gear is deployed. Should be a plain nice flight. What a beautiful landing here at Finnerigi Airport. Should be a really beautiful landing. Mhm. So here we go. Final stop. It's going to take about a bit to get down to approach. So here we go. Last stop. But yeah, the busiest route from Budapest is actually to Istanbul, followed by London Stansted, Frankfurt, Barcelona, and Tel Aviv are the top 5 busiest routes out of Budapest Airport. we go. Down we went. Negative 220 feet per minute. You're welcome, Nightwolf. So we'll turn up in the next exit within a couple nautical miles. Also, we're going to turn the autopilot off. Flight directors are off. We're going to turn on taxi lights. So we'll go ahead and turn left here on the next exit. Yep, that's a good landing, if you say so myself. Left. Here we go. EGG setup and cold dark. Here we go. So that's it, everyone. Welcome to Budapest. So this is where the Champions League final will be held tomorrow. So guys, thank you all so much. We're going to go say hello to a flight sim streamer. I think we're going to raid, I think Ian Fisher. He's doing some DC-6 flying. I think we should raid him. So guys, thank you all so much for coming along here today. And I hope to see you all tomorrow morning in Bristol. So take care, everyone, and have a great rest of your day. And see you all soon. Goodbye, everyone.